Good
And we're live.
morning. We are live. Happy Friday. We are excited to have Sari Kimbell with us today to talk all things foodpreneurs, which I said I might butcher that, but I said it so well.
It was
So proud
perfect.
of myself because I've already had 2 cups of coffee. So I think that's helping me. So, Sari, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is really fun. Great way to spend Friday morning.
Right. So hopefully, if you're watching, maybe if you have questions, you can put them in the comments. We'll make sure we answer them. And you can always, we'll have all the info so you can contact any of us after this if you have burning questions to ask too. And let me just introduce Sari as well so everyone knows what you're about because you got a lot of cool things going on. So she has held just about every position in the CPG food industry, from grocery buyer to selling local produce wholesale into stores, running a commissary kitchen to store marketing director and buyer for Whole Foods Market. Also running a farmer's market, we got to throw that in there. And since 2016, she's focused her efforts to help packaged food business entrepreneurs skip the line to quickly and profitably set up a CPG brand. She offers an online program for early stage entrepreneurs called Food Business Success. And for those ready to go to the next level, one on one coaching too. So lots of cool things you're doing. Amazing. So I guess
Yeah.
we have the background a little bit, but how did that transition go from being more so in the corporate world to now focusing on fully being an entrepreneur and helping entrepreneurs?
Yeah. I mean, it really, oftentimes people just like, oh, I think there's a little delay, but sorry, get you up.
All good.
Um, I think oftentimes we do our own journey and then we're like, oh, we figure it out. And so then we try to help people with their own journey. So mine was definitely a journey of entrepreneurship because I never been one, right? And I actually was a teacher for a while and then I worked on a farm and that's where I really got into sales and wholesale and then I transitioned to Whole Foods Market and then I got laid off and I was like, what do I do? like, and I just kind of started brainstorming and dreaming about like, well, maybe I'll take a little time and play with what I want to do and maybe I'll be an entrepreneur. And it was hard. It was a hard journey for me.
Right.
And so yeah, as I kind of worked through my own entrepreneurship journey, I was managing a commissary kitchen, working in kind of helping a friend out with restaurants. And I was like, I really like helping people as I was meeting with people, have this big idea. And they were so excited, right? I just want to make my salsa. I just want to make my jam. But I would ask them all these questions from my experience of selling wholesale, from being in Whole Foods, where my job as the marketing director was really about selling local, right? I really
Mhm.
took a commitment and a heart to that about local food. And so I just was asking them questions and they just were like, I don't know. I just want to make my my roasted nuts. And so I realized that there was an opportunity there to really help these early stage bootstrapping entrepreneurs, people really wanting to do this passion. It's a passion business. Food is very passionate. And so I started with the Small Business Development Center, kind of built out resources, and then launched my online program in 2019. And then I was doing consulting. So I would build people's businesses for them and kind of hand them a business in a box.
Very
And
cool.
it was really fun for me. I learned a lot, but ultimately it wasn't setting people up for success because they didn't go through the resilience building and the learning and like really understanding their business. And so in 2021, I got certified as a life coach and I really incorporate that mindset piece now where I put the founder at the center of their business through coaching, both my programs. And so I just really want to, because entrepreneurship was so hard for me and I found mindset so valuable and I find I attract the same kind of people. So that's how I came on this journey and it's been quite a journey and so much fun.
And how cool that you kind of went through it first and then you get to teach people too, because obviously that helps. You're like, okay, I've tried this, I've done it, I get what you're going through. What are some of the, I guess, biggest challenges you feel like these foodpreneurs faced, when they're like at the idea phase?
Yeah.
What are the biggest things you see that come up?
Oh man. Okay. So first of all, it's just that people think it should be so easy, right? It's like
Yeah.
this should just like it's just making food. I make food in my kitchen all day long. I share it with people. Like what's the big deal? I should just be able to make my salsa and give it to people. And hopefully that's when they find me after doing some Googling because unfortunately or fortunately, food is highly regulated, right? We have an FDA that oversees food production to help keep
Hmm.
us safe. I mean, food is one of those things that could potentially harm people. And so I think initially there's a like, oh, I didn't know that there was all this stuff. And we are really fortunate in many states, including Colorado, where we're all based, is that we have something called cottage food, which does allow home some production in your home, depending on the product. But I think that's the first hurdle is just realizing like, oh, I can't. I always tell people like, if you want to start a scarf business, like you just go knit some scarves and you could literally be selling
Sell them on
tomorrow.
Etsy, you're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, but food, there's a little bit of a lot of learning and a learning curve. And, from labeling and packaging and, scaling up, right? Like going from your home kitchen to now I got to make more. And ultimately, not being profitable. I think people just kind of they're just so passionate about making their food and they just want to get it out there, which is so awesome. And I say, go for it, like get the food out there. But usually when people come to me is like, I don't think I'm actually making any money. Like, this is a lot
Right.
of work to not make any money.
Well, and I feel like that is at least, kind of my perception too of that world, that it's tough to make a living doing it. And I feel like you probably have to reach like a much larger scale to actually be making a profit, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just making it in your kitchen at home.
Yes, it's awesome that we have cottage food, and many states do have a version of that. But usually, it's we got to get up to scale. There has to be some level of scale, and so kind of reconciling expectations. Like I'm going to make a 60K salary on this in the first year, or I'm going to have $1 million brand in 5 years, and it's like let's kind of back it up a little bit and talk about the reality of food. I mean, I know Andy, you're around the food industry a lot too, but the margins are slim. They are smaller in the food industry, and so I really love to help people create a business that they love, like something that and a lifestyle business that they're just like, I'm really loving this and it's making me money, but it might not be the next Justin's, at least right at the beginning, right? Like that's a 10-year overnight success journey for him. So kind of managing expectations is a big part of what I do.
So I have a question, and this is jumping ahead a little bit on that note, but I'll forget to ask it later. So for businesses that want to scale, we live in Colorado. There's a huge climate of innovation here,
Yeah.
especially in Boulder. There's a large community, naturally Boulder, some people might have heard of. There's funding and support for startup companies. Also, we are the home of Techstars, which is a big incubator. There's a lot of support for these kind of companies, but from what I've experienced working with several of them, there's also a very big difficulty to get into that grocery distribution. So
Yeah.
I'm from Seattle, and in the Northwest in Whole Foods, every single store has a wine steward and a cheese steward, and there's decision making abilities at the store level and then regionally by city, by area. And when you are somewhere like the Rocky Mountain region, we have King Supers, which is a Kroger banner, and all the decisions for them are made out of Cincinnati at their headquarters. Safeway's decisions are made in Pleasanton, California. And Whole Foods has some regional purchasing, but it seems like it's very difficult. Do you see your people that you work with that are evolving from farmers markets to some kind of retail? Are places like Sprouts and Natural Grocers the way to go since we don't have as many independent retailers out here? Because I think outside of Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, San Diego, the West Coast is very tuned to having these specialized at the store level. But for most of the country, you really are dealing with that regional distribution chain where somebody who makes roasted nuts in Parker, Colorado is never going to get a meeting in Texas with Whole Foods. What do you think?
Yeah. And I get that is where we have to manage expectations a little bit. I always encourage people when they're starting to, it's the circle effect. And so you want to start with your smallest inner circle. So start where you live. Again, there's this give and take of scaling up, right? Every time you scale up, it's going to cost you, and there's an investment. And in startup world, right, we call it the valley of death, right? Where you start, you dip down because you're paying a lot of money out, and then hopefully you have the upward curve of sales. In the food industry, I find that there's multiple valleys of death. We have like a little infusion of capital, and then so we put out the capital, and then we have some sales, and then we have to like scale up to the next level, and that's usually in our manufacturing and also in our branding, and our ability to go out and we have to be able to produce large enough quantities if we get into a Safeway or a Whole Foods or something. So I always encourage people to start local, especially a lot of people I work with have never been in the food industry. They're not used to selling. So start local. What are all the independents around you? The gift shops, the little, corner grocery stores. I mean, we're very fortunate. We do actually have quite a few of those that you can start with, the little foodie independent chains. And I want you to prove your concept first, right? And, you can see behind me here, like some packages are like craft bags with Avery labels, and then some are like the really high end, nicely designed. But again, it may not be a good idea to go out and like invest a ton of money up front, like prove the concept, get data. And then as you grow, you kind of keep up leveling your brand and your manufacturing and gaining scale. So nurture the businesses here and then start growing outwards. Now, I will say, to your point, Andy, about like local, so Whole Foods in Rocky Mountain region does have a forager. Her name is Darcy. And she is all
That's
about
an amazing job title.
Yeah. Exactly. So I actually did a version of that before they started that particular role when I worked at regional for a little bit. So her job is all about bringing in local and discovering new local products. Now, it used to be that somebody could like talk to the store leader at one store, and then they were like, sure, we'll bring you in, drop your product off at the back. And it's not like that anymore. I mean, you do have to go through regional. I was laid off in 2015, right before the Amazon stuff. And now it's very like planograms and, it can be a longer process. But her role is really to like help nurture local brands. And I will say that Safeway and Kroger both have local programs, and Natural Grocers is also a great one. They do have a great local program. So there are some ways to kind of get around it. Like Kroger has like an end cap, right? And so does Safeway. So they have these like local end cap programs that are meant to be that like first little hop in. So I worked with a seasoning brand, J. Brady Seasonings. He was able to get into the Safeway local program. So all of a sudden he was in 90 stores, right? But on the end cap, not in the shelf. And so it's a way for them to kind of test it out, check out the product. It's a little challenging still because you're not with the other seasonings, right? It's like people have to stop and look. But it does give people an opportunity to start getting into those stores. So that's, I look at things like hyper local, kind of then a little outside of your area, because you're still going to be doing all the distribution yourself. So you got to like be able to manage your time. Like I worked with a guy who had a salsa business, but he worked full time. And it's like, you can't be running from Denver to Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. Like keep it manageable where you're doing your own delivery, and then you keep you build those accounts, you create a data story, you prove that this is working, that there's velocity, that there's sales. And then there are small distributors. I would definitely recommend people don't just jump to like a UNFI or a KHE. That, we're fortunate and many states have smaller distributors. So go there next and then see what kind of connections they have to local programs. So that would be my recommendation as far as scaling up. It's pretty rare. I do know people every now and again that get that meeting, right when they launch with Whole Foods Austin or HEB or something like that. But it's definitely like the unicorn. And so managing our expectations about the time that this is going to take to build and getting good at creating really good partnerships.
And since we do have a lot of people in the Northwest that listen to this, because that's where I'm from, it's a little bit different in some markets where you do have more independent grocery chains.
Yeah.
In Seattle, for instance, there's one called Red Apple that has 7 locations. There's one called Metropolitan Market that has 6 locations. Central Market, Town and Country. There's all of these smaller chains.
Yeah.
And so Seattle has Met Market. There's one called PCC, Pacific Coast Co-op, that has
PCC.
14 stores. And then in Portland, you have New Seasons, Zupan's, Market of Choice. So it's interesting. One of the points I was getting at is Denver, we live in such a place that there's a ton of farmers markets, more than anywhere I've ever worked. And we have a ton of companies like this. But in grocery retail, we really have the big juggernauts. And it's a little bit more difficult. But one of the things that you said earlier for people who work in the food business who might be watching this, that's very interesting is you have to be able to fulfill getting that opportunity, because sometimes it, like you said, in the olden days, if you got your SKU turned on at corporate, then you had to run around to every store and get the store director to say yes, or the produce manager or whatever. Now, the first time that one of my products got placed into 83 QFCs, which is a Kroger banner, I had to be ready to produce that much product.
Yeah.
And, I got a call one day that we got into 214 Safeway stores in 4 states, and that required 7 different. So you have to be ready to react when you're scaling product from, like you said, the craft bags with the Avery labels where you're selling nuts at the farmer's market to actually having a grocery retail. So could you tell us a little bit about kind of the use case of, are these people that you work with pure startups? Are most of them farmers markets? Kind of what is the avatar of the community?
Yeah. And I always like to say there's no fast money, like large scale. So every time you scale up, right, you're going to like need a lot more money. Just like all of a sudden I'm in 250 stores, like, oh crap. You can't just be like, hey, aunt.
Yeah, we have a kombucha company from Boulder that just got a huge cash infusion and went national recently. You may have seen Rowdy Mermaid, slender cans. I was just in Boston and they had them out there. It was wild.
Yeah, they've really done a great job. But again, they started small, right? They were in small local stores. They kind of got into Whole Foods and really were nurturing those. So it's a process. I would say my avatar is definitely people who just have an idea. They're like, maybe I could, right? I mean, there's a lot of us. We all probably make something that's like our signature product.
Right. Hey, that thought has even crossed my mind,
I think probably every now and again, I talk to people like, no, I don't make anything. But most people do have their signature thing.
Also, Andy, where'd you go?
It's like, I'm out.
He'll be back.
He's coming back. I'm not worried about it. But yeah, they have that signature thing. The common story is like, I make the most delicious, kimchi, salsa, kombucha, whatever it is. And they're like, everybody tells me I should start a business. And there's lots of people who make stuff who don't even consider it. They're like, no.
Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And so my people are the ones that are like, but maybe I could. Maybe I want to. I definitely work with a lot of engineers, doctors, lawyers, like people in professional jobs that I think that they have like this passion, right? This escape of place of creativity in their kitchen. And what I love is working with people who have that nudge of entrepreneurship, but they've never been an entrepreneur. And honestly, you can have the best product in the world as everybody will tell you, like, I make the best salsa
Insert
cookies.
food here.
Insert
Yeah.
here. But ideas are cheap. We like, people can have great ideas, but the actual
Yeah.
execution of it is the hardest part. So I hope your product better be damn good, right? To start. Like,
Yeah.
that's like a given. And then,
And it has to be unique too,
yeah.
because I feel like the food space obviously is so saturated with
Yeah.
tons of things.
And, I have people like, I make the best granola. And I'm like, cool. Like, it's pretty basic. But you can do a lot with branding and your
It's true.
messaging. And I'm a BIPOC woman-owned business, or, I
Mhm.
give back to the community in this way. So even
Yeah.
like a staple product, it is possible for sure. It's always nice. You got to have something that makes you a little bit
Right.
unique. Yeah.
No,
So if
that totally makes sense.
it's not
Well,
your
he's
recipe.
back. Andy, we were
Sorry
worried
about that.
about you.
Quick emergency. I'm cool.
Oh, okay. Good, good.
Oh.
So I do have another question about for people who are kind of at that very local level. Like, for instance, during the pandemic, a lot of the farmers markets were closed.
Yeah.
And we live in Colorado where you have a very limited season. A lot of these businesses are running from April until October, and then the snow comes and there are no farmers markets. So your window of commerce is 6 months out of the year in a place like Denver or Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
So a lot of these businesses were trying to figure out how to do home delivery, store retail,
Yeah.
over the mail, something like that. And it's unfortunate if you sell ice cream, right? But for for a nut roaster in Fort Collins, Colorado, it's very different to try to get out there and run Instagram ads because
Mhm.
you're not trying to garner thousands of followers around the country. You need people within a 15-mile radius of where you live that are going to see you on Sunday at the farmer's market, buy a bag of your nuts, and come back the week after.
Yeah.
So, what is it like for a lot of these people? I know most of them are probably dependent on the farmers markets themselves. First of all, what do you see them doing in the off season if farmers markets are 80% of their revenue? And what are the other tools that you see people using to promote when social media isn't all that reliable for a local physical good?
Yeah. Well, I think to answer as I think a lot of people do plan ahead, that they're like, I'm going to have this boom, and farmers market season for us is like April through October. So it's fairly long, but they plan ahead, and hopefully they're starting to diversify some of their streams. So maybe it is some small wholesale going to some independents and things like that. And wholesale can be really tricky if you're not set up for profitability, because now you're taking a lower amount. So you got to be really careful there. But there's also things that popped up with the pandemic that were like aggregators. So, brand, like almost like food hubs that would then they hosted the website, the small marketplace, and that way people could like do larger shopping, because it is really tough to be like, like, when's the last time you went and bought coffee off of one person's website or chocolate bar, right? It's Unless you're a real diehard foodie and you really love that stuff, most people are not taking the time. They want at least some kind of a marketplace. But we did see a popularity in that, and there are still some of those going on. I run a winter farmers market. There's lots of holiday pop-ups as well. So people do find ways to at least help supplement the income. Um, and then I know a lot of people try to get people on subscriptions, or I always recommend, like, as much as you can you partner with people? So even creating your own small little co-op almost of, if it's not very efficient for you to run around your bread, but can you partner with a coffee maker or a coffee roaster and, a couple of other things so that you can offer people, again, more than just one product. And, part of local so much for people is sustainability, but it's not very sustainable to be like dropping one thing off running around town. So, yeah. And then that's my recommendation, is like partnership, look for local markets, and then just really utilize your farmers market season as much as possible. I work with a kombucha company here in Denver, Third Bird kombucha. And, she expanded to like 5 or 6 farmers markets this year. So she really like put a lot of energy into that to build up her cash flow and awareness. And then she has a subscription service that she actually partners with a group that's also based here called Bondadosa. And they're actually the deliverers. So they aggregate the product and then deliver it. So it is a little more sustainable where they're doing other deliveries as well.
Well, and I could imagine too that because people are more focused now than ever before, it seems like on shopping locally or being sustainable. Like, have you noticed that has helped some of these smaller brands?
I mean, I think certain parts of the country are more aware of that and have an ethos
Right.
of
I mean, we
like,
live in our little Denver bubble here of
yeah.
people being that way.
Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins
Yeah.
definitely have an ethos of supporting local. I think, yeah, Pacific Northwest, definitely places in California, certainly like I would even say East Coast, we tend to see that more often. I just want to emphasize that there is a real sustainability aspect for everybody, even if you're in Kansas or something like of
Mhm.
supporting your local makers. And I think it helps us. I mean, it keeps money in our local economies. It is more sustainable environmentally, and you're creating a safer network of food availability, right? We all saw during the pandemic when it was like, oh, I can't get certain things, right?
Mhm.
But hopefully local makers and producers were able to continue to provide some of those things. So I'm a big proponent of education for local and how it really, there's so many benefits that really evolve out into your community and yeah, the environment and all of those things. Plus we're supporting people. I really believe, and that's why I got certified as a life coach, is that if you're going to grow a business, you grow yourself. Like you cannot not evolve as a person by taking on an
Right.
entrepreneurship role.
And do you have I'm guessing you have a lot of stories of really cool transformations, businesses growing. Like, can you give us just a fun story of a company that you've worked with and how
Yeah.
they shifted their mindset and grew?
Yeah. So I think a great one is Chanel with Good Love Foods. She makes these amazing gluten-free biscuits and cinnamon rolls. And she just had an idea. She was finishing up her graduate degree, and she was like, I had her husband has celiac, and so she developed these home recipes and just had that idea. And she came to me for the online program first for food business success, and we got her launched. And then she came back a year later and worked with me one-on-one as a coach. And, in that time, we got her into her own space. She's scaled up. We've introduced a new product. We really looked at the profitability of those pieces, but she's had to put on new hats, right? Like be a CFO and actually really manage her money, put herself out there, not just going to pop-ups or farmers markets, but now I got to go talk to store buyers. And that's really where she's headed next, is to get into wholesale. But so much of it is overcoming our own desire to procrastinate and fear of failure and rejection and just lack of discipline. Like if you can manage yourself and learn to manage yourself, you're going to be a lot more successful, and then you can start managing other people. But it's a real challenge for people coming into entrepreneurship because they're just like, they're used to working a job and somebody telling them what to do. And that's a whole new ballgame to be like, what do I do? And and getting over procrastination and confusion and all of the things that come up.
Oh, totally. I mean, even I fight procrastination. I mean, we all do. It's not like, oh, even I do, but I was like editing a video the other day and I'm like getting up every 5 minutes to get a snack, you
Right.
know? So it's like that thing where you're like, oh, okay, this isn't like what I really want to do every day. But then once you do it, you're like, okay, I feel a lot better.
Yeah. But
One
in
of
a
the
in a job, somebody's holding you accountable.
Right.
But
But now
in
you're
your
just like, if I don't do it, I'm not gonna get mad at me. I might later,
Yeah.
but
Well, and one of the things to bring it full circle, because I know that a lot of product people watch this, and we'll probably share it with several, is a lot of people think that when you start out making a product, you go to farmers markets, and then once you get into grocery stores, you've made it. You're going
Yeah.
to go into hundreds of stores, and then you're just going to start having revenue piling in. And I've grown several products that I've owned myself and for other people with a fully wholesale model, without retail storefront, without farmers markets. But, the thing is, especially when I had my own brand, I was going out every night to brewers' dinners and restaurant collaborations and competitions and festivals every weekend, riding around with sales reps. It's really not in-store demos is a really big
Yeah.
deal with food. If you want to get into Whole Foods or natural grocers or something, a lot of times you have to commit to putting manpower in their store for 3 or 4 hours at a time to put bars in people's mouths. And that's a big deal. One thing that you said earlier that I really loved, which is going to sound silly for a minute, but the gift shop factor is really big. If you make, I'm looking at some of the things on your shelf behind you that clearly are sort of gift shop kind of things. And we have a few of those local type stores
Yeah.
here in Denver. I know the folks that own the Parker Farmers Market have that local shop down in Parker and one at the Southlands Mall. But one of the best things that I ever got into was the Made in Oregon store. One day I got a call from the Made in Oregon store, and I made one of my products down there. And they said, "We're going to put you in like 7 or 8 stores. Yes, they're in malls, and there's 4 in the airport, but you'll sell a ton if you go." So I signed this contract, and I had to go to the Portland airport for like 6 months. And I stood in the terminal and poured samples of cider for people getting on airplanes. But like they're already through the security. They actually are allowed to buy alcohol. I was
Yeah.
selling a hard cider at the time, but I sold so much volume through these gift shops because it was the Made in Oregon kind of tchotchke thing. And people they seek out stores like that they have the local colleges, or they have the handmade stuff, or artists and
Yeah.
photographers. Here it gets washed away a little bit because we do have so many farmers markets.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to ask you, I know we're coming up on time here. We have a lot of places, like, I mean, around America, shopping malls are losing vendors. And you even have them losing those tent poles like J.C. Penney's and Kohl's and Macy's, where there's these big empty cavities. But I've seen recently people trying to get into retail storefronts and maybe co-oping a space and doing a little tiny pop-up kind of thing. Do you think that there is uh, actual potential in people getting into more independent kind of not like a tasting room, but like their own shop?
Yeah, I do. I think it's definitely an option. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more overhead. You got to take on rent, you got to staff it. So, but if you could collaborate with some folks to then create it, I think malls are very flexible, oftentimes with rents and things like that, especially if they've been losing vendors. But if you don't have traffic, it's going to be challenging. It doesn't really matter if you have the most amazing store. So, you got to be discerning about the location. We do see a lot of food hubs popping up all around the country, or like food halls, I should say, like, places that have like little, it's kind of the next level for food trucks to go into. And so are there opportunities? I've seen storefronts going in there, little kiosks and things like that. So yeah,
Like
definitely trying to
the Edgewater
find.
Market or Stanley, you mean?
Yeah, Avanti or,
Yeah.
The Source is a good one. So things like that, and I know those are all over the country.
Oh, totally. Well, we've had so much info in this episode. I knew honestly very little about this world, and I've learned so much from both of you. So thank you. I feel like
Oh,
people
yeah.
watching hopefully have learned something too. And Sarah, if people want to reach out to you, I know I've put all your social links below us in this video, but give us the shameless plugs of where they can
Yeah.
find you and all of that.
So everything's under foodbizsuccess.com, or if you just search food business success. I have a podcast, a YouTube channel, all the socials. So I'm pretty searchable. I try to be very findable.
Exactly. So go find Sari, talk to her, use her as a resource. And we're so glad you got to join us today.
Thank
And I
you.
know we're a little over our time, but I always like to end by asking, is there anything you are celebrating right now, whether personally,
Mm.
professionally? Give yourself a shout out.
Yeah, celebrating. I'm just celebrating an amazing year. This has been a year for me of growing my business and learning how to have fun in it at the same time.
Amazing.
So I'm really celebrating that, that's what I try to help people do is create a business that they actually love and doesn't just burn them out and drain them, but it's something that's sustainable. So I feel like I've been doing that work this year and I'm really proud of myself for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for helping people with that because as a fellow entrepreneur, we know how important that is.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank
Thanks for
you
having me.
again. Have a great Friday, everybody.